Hello, class. Let us now continue our discussion. We are now in the unit 3. So we'll be talking about the theoretical perspectives and approaches on social deviation. So although for this unit, we'll be talking mainly about the two major theoretical perspectives, it doesn't mean that they are the only theories that we have. So we still have a lot of other theories which you will be learning as we go along in this class. But they are highlighted because they will provide us with a theoretical foundation towards understanding the other perspectives and then approaches in social deviation. Okay, so as a review, we talked about last time that deviance is a violation of the ever-changing social norms. So it's going against the expected social norms. We also said that it is culturally dependent because various cultures would have their own or specific beliefs as to what is desirable and what should be practiced and not. Therefore, it is socially constructed because it's us who are making or building the society and everything that are included in that society. It's a social construct because it's us who have constructed it. And we also highlighted that the norms are ever changing. So it's part of the dynamism of the society. And if we want to change a certain perspective, let's say there are aspects of the culture that should be changed. Therefore, we can do something about them because the norms are changing and it's us after all who are creating the society and everything that comes with it. So we also discussed about the theory of Merton, and we said that we will be meeting his perspectives in the future as well. But for us to have the foundation, because when you read the different theories in relation to deviance, it is very likely that you will encounter his theory. So we talked about the 5 approaches or ways in which a person could be tagged as deviant. So it could be when he is conforming or innovating or submitting to rituals in which he would accept the means and reject the goals, or he could retreat in which he would reject the means and the goals, or he could go beyond by creating new means and new goals through rebellion. But they are all considered as deviants. We have many theories that are actually attempt to explain what deviance and crime mean to society and how they are related to one another. So these are attempts. So we know that theories are building blocks of knowledge. So as we continue exposing ourselves to the different social realities that we could have revisions, or we could change, or let's say affirm if the theory is indeed true, or make some modifications. We also know that it's not only related to social work or in sociology, but it's also true in psychology and in other fields that deals with human behavior. These are just attempts to explain or to provide reasons, to provide us with a greater understanding of certain situation or behavior. But it doesn't mean that they or these theories will be explaining everything or something that could be applied instantly in the given situation. So in here, we can see that crime and deviance are actually related. And at some point, they are also overlapping. And they overlap especially in the instances in which the moral and social code are being broken, like in the case of murder. So in the context of morality and in the expectation of society, and in the given social laws, legislations, or policies that we have, those who would commit murder are actually committing deviance and crime at the same time. There are also instances in which it's only the legal code that are broken and not the moral code. That's why they could be qualified as crime, but not necessarily deviance by the society, because others who would hear about a certain act would even say that why is it the person is being given penalty? What's the big deal about that? Questioning, therefore, why is it we have those legal policies? So we also know that it's human beings who are also creating laws, and it is also somehow something that are still would be considered as a social construct as well, because after all, if a certain group or individuals would question the legality of certain law or its constitutionality, then even laws can also be changed. So the context of crime, there are actions that may not be legally correct, but if the society would want to change, then it can be done. But if it's the moral code that has been broken, like in the given example in here, you can be labeled as deviance, but it's not necessarily that you are committing a crime, because there is no law punishing your action. Okay. So the first theory that we're going to talk about, which will serve as a foundation of the many other theories that we will be learning later on in the semester, are the objective and subjective perspective or views in looking into the deviance. But first, let us try to understand what do we mean when we say that a certain act is objective or a certain act is subjective. So let us look at them through this illustration. So if we're having this live class, of course, I'll be asking you what's your take, or how would you understand the illustration given. But since I'm recording this in advance, so I'll just skip the discussion part. But when we say that it's objective, aside from the um, the reasoning that are given, that are going into the standards given based on certain framework, let's say it passes the census, or a set of criteria that are being given or accepted or had been tested. Let's say it's a theory that is applied, or it's the normal way of counting it. Like in this case, the number 4 has been counted as it is in the acceptable manner of counting it. That's why it's objective, because it is something that is passing through the acceptable set of knowledge with um, a reasoning that is accepted through framework or through given set of criteria. While subjective, as they say, would usually describe situations not not based on this set of acceptable logic or reason, but most of the time through emotion or or judgment that had been felt instantly without considering that much with the theoretical or the logical reasons why would we say or state a certain judgment or describe things. So we can be objective and subjective, but it doesn't mean as well that they don't mix. Uh, we can see later on that even in the sense of subjectivity, there could also be some sense of being objective and vice versa. So let's talk about the objectivist or the norm based. So the basis in here, that's why it's called objective, is the norm. So we know that deviance has something to do with the norm. That's why I reviewed the definition a while ago. So these are type of deviance that are conceptualized as norm violations. So the basis of considering that a certain act is deviant is because a norm has been violated, like committing murder, committing rape. And objectivism is the idea that we would be entitled to what we have learned. So not specifically just with men or women. So for us to be gender sensitive and inclusive. Objectivist is a philosophical system developed by Russian American writer Ayn Rand. So the basis, that's why it's being called objective, is the norm itself of the certain culture. And it is obtained from inductive logic and concept formation. So um, according to this perspective, the pursuit of happiness is the purpose of life. So there is a deeper reason that is acceptable. So that's why we call it an acceptable basis, because it's the reason why it is being tagged as objective, because others or other people have generally accepted that it is the um, justifiable reason. That's why it's called objective. So when we say that a certain logic is inductive, we are actually referring to the act of making a generalized conclusion based from the specific scenario. So from the examples we have seen, from the norms that are violated, we can come up with a general conclusion. So the process of coming up with the decision did not came in instantly, but a certain person had looked into the specific situation. So whereas if it's a deductive reasoning, the reasoning is an act that is backing up a generalized statement with a specific scenario. Okay? So, meanwhile, the opposite of being objective is being subjective. So, the subjectivist approach is also called as the label based, because the label that we are creating are also subjective. We have our own reasons, we have our own set of reasons why we would label. So they would view behavior as the objects of socially constructed norms and values. The object could be different among people. So as to the way you define an action, as to the way you would say that a certain act is deviant or not, is based on your own labels or your own construct or judgment or stereotypes. So the reasons that you have. So according to Howard Becker, deviance is actually not a quality of the act or person who would commit a certain act, but it is a consequence of the application by others of rules and sanctions of an offender. So it's the result of the action, not necessarily the action itself, but how we would react, how we would label. So the deviant is one to whom the label has successfully been applied. So you have been tagged or labeled, let's say in a family, you are already being labeled, let's say, as the someone who would bring trouble. So the moment that such label has been successfully applied to you, then it would be somehow difficult to change that context, because you're already being tagged as deviant. Of course, it can be changed. So these are about changes. And we say, we acknowledge that even the norms and even the label that we have with people can also change. Okay? So labeling theory is one of the theories that we have, which is an attempt to explain why a certain act is considered deviant. So from that title itself, it's about being labeled already. But we will be discussing more about labeling theory in the finals. But in for us to understand this, you can look at this definition that a person would instantly label a certain person as the killer based on, let's say, how a person is dressed, or the action of the person, or some acts that he had seen prior to that, but may have been missing the prior events or context. So the judgment had been applied successfully, but you know that the facts that you have before you label that person may not be enough, but you have already labeled the person to be as such. So talking about social norms. So this is important to be clear about the definition of social norms, since we will be always talking about social norms in the course of our discussion about deviance. So when we say social norms, these are the principles or models of behavior specific to a given social group or society. So specific to that group, let's say to the group of students or in your set of friends, sa inyong mga barkada, may ara kamo da mga norms that could be written or not written or had been agreed through a process or kung ano man ang story before you have come up with a set of norms or expectations that you have to keep with one another. So social norms are in keeping with what is commonly accepted and legitimized by the value system specific to each society or social group. So it could change. So before, we're not really required to wear face mask when we're outside. But something had happened and it created that set of social norm. So if you go against that, you're not only violating the given policy, but you're also going against the norm. Okay, so it will create some sense of discomfort among other people. Okay, so I will be requiring you to read a certain material. I think it's 8 pages for you to have a thorough understanding about the different concepts in Deviance. So I'll be giving set of questions which you will be doing today, and you have until 11:59 p.m. tonight to complete the worksheet. So let me discuss this very common concept as well, because you will be dealing with or you will be meeting this as you go along with your study in relation to deviance. So we have primary deviance and the secondary deviance. So primary deviance refers to the violation of a norm or a rule that does not result in the violators being stigmatized as deviant, while for the secondary deviance, you are being stigmatized or publicly labeled as deviant and treated as an outsider. So we can connect that secondary deviance is actually a concept in subjectivist or the label based. So the primary deviance could be caused by factors like ignorance, the influence of peers or parents, your environment, while the secondary deviance is you have been considered deviant because of the negative social reactions, because of the beliefs of people about you. So there is little social reaction for primary deviance, and the deviant is being shunned by the society. So it is being labeled, it is being faced with certain judgment. While for the primary deviance, people would instantly dismiss what you've done. For primary deviance, it is a set of actions that would usually involve relatively small rule breaking. While for secondary deviance, it involves crime and acts that are so serious and that contributed to the social reactions. Or it could be the certain act is a taboo or a big no-no, or it's against the policy or the norms. That's why it's really being given negative social reaction. So you are being secondary labeled as deviant because it's not direct. So another important concept is stereotype, which is an overall or overgeneralized belief about a particular category of people. It's also labeling because you are being given certain set of behavior that are expected of you. So it's like putting a person in a box, and the moment you go outside that box, then you are stereotyped, you are being labeled, you're being called names. So it is an expectation people might have about every person of a particular group. And the type of expectation can also vary And there are reasons like the long-held belief about certain culture or personality, preferences, appearance, or ability. So people would stereotype. For example, people have stereotypes about what a social worker should be or what a military person should be. So there are reasons that are based on the given set of rules, but there are also reasons that are already based from the personal expectations. That's why we say that although it's overgeneralized, we cannot rely on stereotype because they could be inaccurate, they could be not open to new information, but we also do not dismiss them instantly because they can also be accurate. So it's important that we would of course listen intently and try to weigh things. Assessment is very important. Why are we talking about stereotyping? Because most of the time, you'll be asked to share your views, to make your recommendation, to write about your assessment, let's say about a certain case. And if you are not careful about it, you may create or you may make recommendations, assessment, or judgment that are based on stereotype or labeled concepts about people. And that is unfair. And of course, it's against the non judgmental principle for social workers. So let me end with this quote, and I hope you will reflect on this on your own. Let us all stop labeling people just because they're not like us. Okay, so I'll be giving the rest of the instructions in our MS Teams, and I hope that you will really take time to study all of the lessons that we have discussed for the midterm of the phase 3, and that you will study your lesson for the midterm exam, and of course, for your preparation for the board examination. So thank you so much, class, and enjoy the rest of the day.